So, Chapter 17 of Boruto's 2 Blue Vortex has been out for a while now, and therefore I've had a while to sit down and think about what transpired in this relatively talking-filled chapter. See, because here's the thing, I actually prefer these talking chapters. I like chapters that give me things to chew on, chapters that expand the universe with subtle hints, chapters that spin my mind into theories as I try and piece together what's being built out in the story. And Chapter 17 did a fantastic job of accomplishing all three of those things. And while by far and away the most important thing set up in Chapter 17 of 2 Blue Vortex was the two Shinju and Matsuri and Ryu being split up through Shikamaru's plan, that's not the part of the chapter I've been hyper-fixated on. See, because the part of the chapter that I've been hyper-fixated on was an absolute throwaway line. A couple of panels of conversation between Ryu and Matsuri that have been burrowing its way into my brain for the last couple of weeks now. See, because early on in Chapter 17, when Ryu and Matsuri are having a conversation about Boruto, Matsuri says, and I quote, "According to the trees, Boruto himself placed the toad here, so he was definitely here." Now, obviously, they're talking about the toad that Ryu and Matsuri are standing over that clearly belongs to Boruto. Now, in response to this, Ryu says, "What trees? This is a desert." To which Matsuri responds to by saying, "There's trees everywhere, even deep underground." Now, for those of you who aren't herbalists or biologists or geologists, this line may not have seemed like much. I mean, yeah, there can be trees everywhere and roots that run deep underground, even in deserts. Right? No, actually, not right. And thus Matsuri's sitting there and saying that there's tree roots that run all across the globe, even in the deserts of the Naruto world, proves from a biological, geological, and herbological standpoint that the Naruto world is not like ours. And that's all well and good, but hardly enough to make a video. Right, Nick? I mean, we're not that starved for content, are we? Right? No, fortunately, we haven't made it there yet. I mean, we might one day, but we haven't made it there yet. No, see, because Matsuri confirming that there are tree roots that run through the entirety of Naruto's globe, even in places that they shouldn't, confirms that there are still remnants of the two times the divine tree has grown across the entirety of the globe to reach every single human living on it. That is to say that to this day, divine tree roots still run through the center of Naruto's world like superhighways cutting through rock. And if that's true, it would not only tell us exactly how the Shinju operate, what their powers are based off, and how they're created, but it could also possibly explain Shibai's death, the location of his corpse, and why the Otsutsukis are so obsessed with Earth. So this one line that seems like a relative throwaway actually holds a lot of importance. And thus today we're hoping to use this one piece of evidence to substantiate a whole lot of claims, because today we're talking the truth about the Shinju Kishimoto doesn't want you to know. Before we get into all that, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So, like we said, in Chapter 17, it's established that there are tree roots everywhere in the Naruto world, even in places where they absolutely should not be. Some of you might be saying right now, "Oh, but couldn't the desert been a forest millions of years ago?" And yeah, it absolutely could have been. However, if hypothetically at one point that area that is now a desert was a forest, there wouldn't still be tree roots there. Biomass degrades. It's why we have dirt. It's why we have oil. So that argument doesn't hold up at all. However, the argument that does hold up in the Naruto universe is the fact that on two separate occasions, a divine tree has grown its roots into the earth and yanked out every single human and wrapped him up in a cocoon. And while humanity bounced back from both of these scenarios, we never necessarily saw what happened to the divine trees that grew these roots into the ground. So yes, in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, Naruto does use a lava Rasen shuriken to cut down the divine tree. However, just because Naruto cuts down the divine tree doesn't mean he destroys its root system. In fact, we can still very clearly see after Naruto cuts down the divine tree that the base of the divine tree still exists. And that divine tree was actually put in a substantially worse position than the first divine tree that Kaguya interacted with. See, because the first divine tree that Kaguya interacted with already had a chakra fruit, and Kaguya ate that chakra fruit, enacted infinite Tsukiyomi, and then put the entire world under her control to make an army of white Zetsu. But in both these scenarios, which had massively different scales, mind you, as the first time that Kaguya used the divine tree to wrap up all of humanity, there was only like 10,000 or so humans on Earth. However, the second time that it was used in the 4th Great Shinobi World War by Madara, hundreds of thousands of people that dotted all corners of the globe were grabbed by the divine tree. And those roots seemingly don't just go away or degrade. Yes, there's the hypothetical circumstance that the divine tree that grew its roots through Earth 1,000 years ago when Kaguya first enacted infinite Tsukiyomi had its roots degrade. But mind you, by the time of the Boruto timeline, the 4th Great Shinobi World War was only, what, 20 years ago? Those roots could still very much be present deep underground. And the idea that the roots of the divine tree still spread all throughout the globe makes a lot of sense when we consider the physiology, powers, and general motivations of the Shinju. See, the Shinju are referred to in the English translation as divine trees, and this is because they're created by modified claw grimes biting people. And a modified claw grime is just a 10 tails clone trying to find an Otsutsuki to turn into a divine tree. But not only are the Shinju referred to as divine trees, but when they're partially destroyed, they're able to rebuild parts of their body with what appears to be wood and vines. On top of this, if they're completely restored, they have to be brought back to their Shinju base, which appears to exist under the giant root structure of a huge tree. And their soul thorn has to be placed on top of this mysterious black box that channels the power of the claw marks. And to take it even one step further than this, Matsuri and Jura appear to be able to use wood release, as Matsuri is responsible for the maintenance of existing and the creation of new Shinju, while Jura is able to yank roots out of the ground to make Christmas ornaments out of Jonin from Konoha. And thus all of this taken into consideration with Matsuri's words from chapter 17 seems to confirm that not only are the Shinju walking divine trees, but also they tie their metaphorical and physical roots back to the divine trees of old. And therefore, if we're assuming the Shinju do tie their roots back to the divine trees of old, wouldn't it make sense to reason that their base that appears to exist under a gigantic tree whose roots grow deep into the earth is actually built under the remnants of a previously grown divine tree? Now, as to whether or not that's the divine tree that Kaguya comes to Earth for, or the divine tree grown in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, we can't necessarily say. However, to me, the substantially more likely possibility is that this base is built under the original divine tree, the divine tree that gave Kaguya chakra that she was able to pass to humanity. And if that is truly where the base is located, it could possibly explain what that gigantic mysterious black box in the center of their hideout is. And if we're thinking logically, that gigantic black box must have some kind of relation to the original divine tree. I mean, yes, there is absolutely a possibility that the Shinju decided to set up camp underneath the original divine tree and brought a super creepy Shinjutsu-based black box with them. 100% that is a possibility. Not a good one, but it is a possibility. But to me, it seems substantially more likely that that black box has been there since even before Kaguya. See, it's never been officially stated that the information that we got from Kaguya, Hagoromo, and Hamura about the beginning of the world through their eyes has been officially retconned. Yes, we got some information in Boruto that was contrary to what we heard in Naruto Shippuden, but nothing has ever been officially retconned. And therefore, there's an equal possibility that Kaguya jumped Ishiki, tore off his bottom half, fed that to a 10 tails, and turned that into the chakra fruit that she ate that eventually gave humanity chakra, as there is the chance that Ishiki and Kaguya descended down to Earth for the original reason that they listed, which is that they were chasing after a divine tree that they thought existed on this planet. The divine tree already existed on the planet and already had a chakra fruit. How was it made and how did it come to fruition? Well, the answer to me seems relatively simple. See, we understand that Shibai's body is somewhere on Earth. It's how Amado was able to use Shibai's DNA to give all of the cyborgs he created at least a shot at awakening to some of Shibai's Shinjutsu. It's why Ada has the Senrigan, Daemon has Reflect, Code has the claw marks, Kashin Koji has the 10 paths, and so on and so forth. Now, this doesn't necessarily guarantee that Shibai died on Earth, but it gives us a pretty good shot at assuming that he did. And there's a lot of evidence to substantiate the idea that he did. Whether it be the broken Otsutsuki markings at Kara Hideout, or the fact that Kaguya said that a divine tree existed on Earth before she and Ishiki even got there. All this also stacks up when you consider the fact that Shibai is said to have ascended from his body. And since its ascension is only something that can happen after consuming a chakra fruit, there's a solid possibility that Shibai and his partner at the time came to Earth, made it into a chakra fruit, Shibai ate it, ascended, and then left his body behind on Earth. And as it's been stated multiple times, mind you, that a divine tree absorbs all of the chakra from a planet that it consumes, including those who are living and those who have passed, it would make sense if hypothetically Shibai were to ascend from his body and leave his body on Earth, that massive well of chakra that existed within his body would continue to substantiate that divine tree he left behind. Because while we've seen that a divine tree has the ability to absorb most of the chakra from a planet, we've also seen when we were introduced to Momoshiki that Momoshiki was able to grow multiple divine trees on one planet. Mind you, he called that planet kind of mid. And while all of these divine trees appeared withered or broken after consuming all this planet had to give, if we're assuming that Shibai was able to consume a chakra fruit from the planet that Naruto exists on, that would mean in two separate circumstances, a divine tree was not only grown, but also its chakra fruit was consumed off the chakra of Earth. And neither time the planet ceased to exist. Now, in the case of Kaguya gaining chakra, we actually know why the planet didn't ceased to exist. And it's not because the divine tree she ate the chakra fruit from was weak. We know that Kaguya wanted to rule over Earth as the rabbit princess. And so in an episode of filler, and this is why filler is occasionally important, we saw that Kaguya, after enacting Infinite Tsukiyomi, actually let out thousands of humans from her grasp so that the Earth could continue on living. Yeah, they just completely skipped over the idea of how Earth continued being after the first Infinite Tsukiyomi in the manga. Isn't that wild? They're like, yeah, hey, the Earth got hit with a world-ending move 1,000 years ago, but we're here now, and you can't even be like,
well, oh, Hagoromo and Hamura had kids and they repopulated the Earth.
Hagoromo spent the majority of his life walking around the globe talking to people from all different corners and sections, none of which he was related to. So if anybody ever tells you that Naruto filler is not important, ask them, honestly, how the globe survived the first Infinite Tsukiyomi. Anyways, if we're assuming that the divine tree that Kaguya ate the chakra fruit of to gain chakra actually came from Shibai, then this would mean that if Shibai was going to discard his corpse anywhere, it would probably be around this tree. And therefore, in actuality, maybe the reason the world was able to bounce back after Shibai turned it into a chakra fruit and consumed it and ascended was because he left his body behind to unintentionally act as sustenance for the planet. And his body now exists, well, as the giant black box in the Shinju hideout.
Nick, that's an absolutely ridiculous idea. Why would his body exist as a black box?
Well, maybe it's not Shibai's physical body, but it could absolutely be serving as his casket. See, because not only are the roots at the Shinju hideout required to build back a completely destroyed Shinju like in Hidari's case, they're also required to birth new Shinju like Ryu. And in both of these circumstances, the soul thorn of either the destroyed Shinju or the newly born Shinju need to be placed on top of this mysterious black box. On top of this, the black box appears to be a conduit for the claw mark Shinjutsu ability. And I'd like to remind you that Shinjutsu ties its roots back to Shibai, as the only reason that Code and therefore the Shinju have access to the claw marks is because of the DNA extraction that Amado placed in Code. On top of this, oddly enough, we've seen something that looks slightly akin to these black boxes before, with Jigen/Ishiki's black cubes that he would pull out of his Daikokuten. Therefore, one may want to assume that that's simply what this black box is, a Daikokuten black square from Jigen or Ishiki. But not only did those look different, but they also weren't conduits for the claw marking ability, and thus the fact that all of the Shinju and Code are able to use this black box as a home station of sorts that they can teleport back to using their claw marks proves that this black box at the center of the Shinju hideout is nothing like the Daikokuten black boxes. However, that doesn't mean that they aren't slightly similar in the fact that both of them tied their roots back to an Otsutsuki, possibly Shinjutsu ability. We don't know if the Daikokuten or Sukuna Hikona are Shinjutsu, it's never been confirmed. Both of these abilities do tie their roots back to high-level Otsutsuki abilities. Now, I'm not saying that the reason that the Shinju have access to this claw marking ability and therefore connection to this black box is because of Shibai. That is, rather obviously, because Code is responsible for the creation of the Shinju through the augmentation of the claw grimes. And one of the augmentations that Code made to said claw grimes was covering them in claw marks. And rather interestingly, I believe that's why the Shinju ended up at the hideout they ended up at. See, to this day, we still don't know how the first Shinju was created. It appears as though Juro was created from the Ten Tails that was freed from the Kara hideout by the other Shinju. And as we recently saw, Ryu was just created by Matsuri in the last couple of chapters. This means that Hidari, Matsuri, and the Bug Shinju were the first three of the Shinju. Now, as to how they were created, we can't really say. I mean, it stands to assume that one of them had to be created first, and as Matsuri was responsible for the creation of Ryu, it stands to reason that that person was Matsuri, but we just don't know right now. However, the answer may lie in Matsuri's connection to these apparently global roots. See, because claw grimes, whether they were modified or not, whenever they bit somebody, they turned into divine trees. Failed divine trees, but still divine trees. Now, this is interesting, because if there is truly a global network of old divine tree roots that still run through every crevice and crack of the Naruto globe to this day, it would stand to reason that if new divine trees were made on this very same globe, that it would stand to reason that these failed divine trees roots would interact with these old divine tree roots in some capacity or another. So why do only the modified claw grimes that have Rinnegan and are covered in claw marks end up creating Shinju? Well, because inherently those claw grimes that are running around covered in claw marks and with Rinnegan are endowed with Otsutsuki DNA in a way. Being covered in claw marks, and therefore by extension kind of Shibai's DNA and chakra, these modified claw grimes that were turning into failed divine trees, in their failure were injecting Shibai's chakra into a divine tree that grew its roots into the ground. And therefore the reason that Shinju were created in the first place from these modified claw grimes could be because of the connection to Shibai through the claw marks on the claw grimes. When we take what we know about divine trees and the circumstances necessary necessary for their actual growth, and that something that's being grown are kind of conduits of Shibai's power in the form of the Shinju. And this explains why they need to be built on top of the black box and why they need to return to it to be completely healed. Energetically, they're tied to Shibai, who exists within this black box. A perfect tomb shrouded in his Shinjutsu ability that makes it impossible for those who don't have Shinjutsu of their own to access his body. It also explains why the Shinju are able to channel their claw mark ability through their Rinnegan. Because all the images we've ever gotten of Shibai, he, unlike Code, does not have gigantic claw fingers. But what he does have is a Rinnegan in his forehead, like Momoshiki. And the further you go with this line of thinking, the more it makes sense. We know Shibai had to eat a chakra fruit, which means he had to ascend. We know that his body was found on Earth. We know that Shinju have a strong and lasting connection to the divine tree. It's now been established that there is roots all across the globe, and this explains why there was already a divine tree when Kage and Ishiki got to the Earth. It explains why there's two Ten Tails, as both Kage and Ishiki and Shibai both would have brought their own Ten Tails, but only one of them would have been needed to be used, as there was already a divine tree. This explains why Earth is such a perpetual target by the likes of the Otsutsuki, like Momoshiki, Kinshiki, Kaguya, and Ishiki, as the chakra and Shinjutsu of Shibai exist on this planet quite literally under the roots of a divine tree that could be grown again. It explains why Kaguya got so powerful with just one chakra fruit, as she was able to access this power, though in a more limited sense, as there wasn't that much of humanity on the globe at the time that she enacted her first infinite Tsukiyomi. And it also explains why Kaguya and Madara awoke a Rinne Sharingan when somebody who ate way more chakra fruits than them in Momoshiki never did. As the chakra fruit Ten Tails divine tree, unfortunately, they're all talked about in the same way in Shippuden, created from Naruto's Earth, is energetically powered through the corpse of Shibai. Now, is that a lot to assume just from a comment of Matsuri saying that there's roots all over the globe, even in the deserts? Maybe, but there's so many other tiny pieces of evidence that back up this claim. And sometimes you gotta learn how to connect those pieces. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you think's going on with the black box or the Shinju's hideout? Do you believe the roots running throughout the entirety of the globe is suspicious, or if it's just some biological miswriting from Ikimoto? Let me know in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to write a bunch of invoices for ads because that's being a YouTuber.